to switch gears to hear from Joe, CEO of Major Clarity, who's been invited to share his experiences, and our student partner, Jonathan, is going to take over in just a bit. And it's promising to be a super awesome conversation. Then we're going to transition to Rocket Pitch. Before then, having a brief intermission, we'll have snacks and appetizers arriving at about 3:15 p.m. So we'll have a little bit of an intermission. And then we'll launch into Rocket Pitches. We have our 4 past Rocket Pitch winners here with us in the front row with exclusive seating here. And both the audience and judges will have the opportunity to hear how your pitches have evolved and how you prepared for today. And then finally, we'll wrap the evening with an awards ceremony. We'll announce the prestigious second annual Henry R. Broadus Innovator Award, our most engaged patron, most engaged hub ventures, including Launchpad and Tribe Ventures, the Rocket Pitch Face-Off crowd favorite, and of course, our Rocket Pitch winner, right? In addition to all of these individual awards and prizes, these individuals also receive the coveted invitation to an entrepreneurial gathering at the president's residence. So, I think that about covers it for my part right now. I'm going to hand things over to Jonathan to kick off our guest speaker. Jonathan, take it away.
Welcome, everybody, to our fantastic end-of-year event, Demo Day. I'm so happy to see all these beautiful faces in here. As said, my name is Jonathan Powell, and I'm here to host our distinguished keynote speaker here with us today. But first, I do want to give a quick rundown of today's format. First, I'm going to start by introducing our guests with a brief bio. Then I'm going to hand over the mic to our guests to describe their venture, so you'll all have a better idea of what it is. Next, we'll engage in a brief interview so that everyone can hear his story, get a sense of his entrepreneurial journey. Then during the interview portion today, we'll be using Menti.com, which is an interactive program where you will have an opportunity to answer questions alongside Joe and get live responses and reactions. Questions from me will be largely based on the Hub's pillars of entrepreneurial thinking. They're on the wall right there. And we'll use these as the central ideas for everything we do here at the Hub, because we believe that they are essential in developing the skills and mindsets of an entrepreneur. If we have time, we'll open the discussion to an audience Q&A, where you will have the opportunity to introduce yourself and ask your own questions that you may have. All right, with that being said, I am super excited to introduce our guest, Joe, to the Hub community today.
Thanks. Don't know how to turn this guy on. Oh, here we go. That's let me get up. But thanks, excited to be here. Share what I've been doing last couple years, I guess at this point, 7 or 8, and my journey with William and Mary, and hopefully some of it has some value for you all. Absolutely.
Thank you. So first off, so we can give a little preface, a little context to what Joe has been doing. Joe Belsterling founded Major Clarity, an academic planning and career exploration SaaS platform, and scaled it to over 6 million students and 8 figures of revenue. He previously has consulted schools and organizations on building entrepreneurship programs for students, worked on political campaigns, and done various advisory work, including helping the U.S. Department of Education build better resources and guidelines for schools, conducting ed tech pilots. And Joe is a graduate of the College of William and Mary in Humanities year 2015. Absolutely.
Old enough that when I went here, this was apartments.
All right, well, then again, I will say it's exciting to have you here with us today. So first off, if I may ask everybody to take out your phones and open up Menti.com. And just give me a quick thumbs up when you finish it. It's MENTI.com. Everybody got it open? Just a quick thumbs up. Fantastic. All right, so our first question, which is for everybody here in the audience. What do you believe are the most valuable qualities you have as an entrepreneur?
Go back. Go back. Flip it up to that. Oh. There you go. Perfect.
Sorry, having on. Perfect. So I'll ask once again, what are the most valuable qualities to have as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest answer would be grit. I mean, there's a whole book on this by Angela Duckworth, and it's one of the core values here. But I'll try to give a different answer then to go a little bit deeper. And I think I would say conscientiousness, right? I think one of the things I struggle or I see young entrepreneurs struggle with the most is the problems that stem from a lack of conscientiousness, right? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of distractions and there's a lot of shiny objects in entrepreneurship. And Max Levchin, who founded was part of PayPal Mafia and founded Slide and has done a ton of crazy stuff. He has a saying or like a quote, it's not a quote per se, but a philosophy of you have to be so careful of what you do in entrepreneurship because anything can be optimized to infinite, right? And when you really start to unpack what he's trying to say there, is you can spend your time doing anything, a single task, working on a business, whatever, for the rest of your life. And so much about entrepreneurship is working on the right things, not getting distracted, not getting caught up in buzz, not getting caught up in shiny objects, and also being self-aware, understanding I'm not good at this, right? Not having hubris, not having those things, managing people. And so like I think grit is the simplest answer and what I would default to, but given that that's there and one of the values, I think one of the most critical skills for entrepreneurs is having a degree of conscientiousness and an ability to have that self-awareness in everything that they're doing.
Absolutely, that is integral to knowing what you're going to be doing, being self-directed, and having a mindset for all of that. So, and then I want to ask, does that play anything to your time you have on there? I want to know the experiences that you may remember fondly that may have shaped your professional career.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was really fortunate. Some people have told me to lean into sharing some of these experiences. Some people sometimes are like, don't share some of those experiences because I had a very unconventional William and Mary experience. So when I got here on campus, I realized that the classroom wasn't for me and I was fortunate enough, but I'm going to share it anyway. I forgot to add that caveat. I was fortunate enough to build good relationships with some of the administration, and so they exempted me from my freshman requirements, and I was able to move to DC and work for one of the U.S. Senate committees as part of a program they had for upperclassmen. And that kind of kickstarted just an unconventional 4 years. Then I was back sophomore year taking classes, and I was taking classes, but I got to do some independent studies, I got to do some consulting, I got to do a variety of different things. And I think that goes into the conscientiousness, right? I think William and Mary helped me very early on to start getting highly, highly intentional about and I say this, my employees would joke because I say this all the time, but it's like, if you can be best in the world at something, put all of your energy into that. And if you can't be, you're completely wasting your time trying to develop skills. One of my favorite quotes is you try to be good at everything and you end up great at nothing. And I think I really started to learn and cement that belief and that philosophy through my William and Mary experience and learn to explicitly focus on what I thought I could do better than anyone else and tune out everything else. And I was really fortunate and blessed to find the relationships with leaders and administrators at William and Mary who allowed me to pursue that in a way that worked for me.
Fantastic. I know what works for you is definitely integral in these times. And I also want to give kudos to you freshman year by passing all the requirements again and stuff. Hey, that's fantastic. Oh my goodness. So then with that sort of success that you experienced there in William and Mary and then within your own venture, I want to ask the crowd first, what is your measurement of personal success in life? So as you look at the responses pop up on the screen and reflecting back on your own experiences of success and your own triumphs against adversity, are there any similarities or differences that you see from your current definition?
Yeah, I mean, I would say my current answer is a very agnostic one. I have no clue, right? I would say my answer when I was going through college and even over the last 8 years was a very utilitarian one. So I've always really been a big believer in the logical value behind kind of utilitarian principles. And I looked at success as fairly binary and fairly numbers based. It was the greatest impact on the greatest number of people. So looking at kind of the multiplier effect of the depth of impact versus the breadth of impact and whatever the greatest impact I could have, that was my definition of success. I did sell my business 1.5 years ago, and I've been on a really interesting and weird journey the last like 6 months of redefining a lot of this. And like the short answer of if you ask me what's your measurement of personal success in life, like I have no clue. I'm trying to figure that out right now. And I think I'm going through like a new and interesting chapter and thinking about different things and caring about different things and broadening my horizons. I think it's a really complex question when you really try to unpack it and really try to understand yourself deeply. I think impact still matters. I think personal joy matters, which a lot of people said. Happiness matters. I think freedom is huge. Optionality is huge. Relationship is huge. But I'm currently in the process of trying to rediscover what my answer to that question is, so I can use that as my northern light for my next chapter.
Absolutely. We're always in the process of growing, changing, trying to figure out stuff for ourselves, trying to be the best version of ourselves. Absolutely. And you said you're still trying to discover that. I want to ask from perhaps when you were just maybe in high school at William and Mary and where you are now, how has that definition changed over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I kind of alluded to, over the last 8 years, it was just greatest impact on greatest number of people. Like that was my North Star, and that was all I focused on and all I obsessed on. And that's how I made business decisions. That's how I made decisions of what to work on in my life. Like that's how I was pretty simple-minded in a lot of that. And I think up through building major clarity, it was really easy for that to be my North Star. And so I think that's what I was fixated on a lot. And I mean, in high school, I don't think I really had any idea of who I was. In college, I started to develop a thesis, and then I spent college and my 20s trying to build out that thesis. And I think I did a decent job, had a decent impact on 6 million people. So I'll take it. But then you get to a point where those things aren't in your control anymore, and it's no longer up to you to carry that responsibility. And that's what's kind of led to the start of the change of these definitions.
Absolutely. I love the definition that you kind of alluded to. You make the claim first of what that definition is, and then over time you tend to either prove it right or prove it incorrect. I do love that definition. And then I want to throw another question out to the crowd. What are the top 3, looking on our wall, what do you believe are the top 3 pillars of entrepreneurial thinking to be successful? So as you watch them pour in, people think about it, give it a lot of deliberation. I want to ask you then, based on your own entrepreneurial journey, which one of our pillars of entrepreneurial thinking would you work on leveraging more and why?
Yeah. So I have kind of a 2-part answer, right? The first one is simple, and I don't really think I need to expound on it, which is why I have a 2-part answer. It's what I said before too. It's grit. Like it's just such a slap you in the face value of you get punched in the face so many times in an entrepreneurial journey that grit is just so critical. And I think it's just a non-negotiable. The second thing I want to lean into actually though is openness to risk. But the reason it's a little bit of a caveated answer is I actually think that people's ego, myself included, makes them so terrible at perceiving risk, right? And I want to walk through this example in my own life, and like I had to override my own ego in this example. But this thinking was critical to me finding success as an entrepreneur. So when I graduated college, I didn't grow up with much. We didn't come from means. When I was born, we were below the poverty line, but my parents make a good, fine
lower middle class living, but it wasn't like they were financially supporting me, but I say that to say I had a loving, so I know not everyone has this, I had a loving, great foundational support from my family, you know, and so when I graduated college, I went to DC and I was entertaining some job offers and like private equity and different things like that, or doing this own thing. And I just kind of ran the numbers, right? And I just kind of looked at it and I said, the best case scenario for what happens to my life if I travel down this pathway is X, right? The best case scenario of what happens to my life if I travel down this alternative pathway is 100x, right? Or 1000x, you can't even quantify it. Now let's look at the worst case scenarios. The worst case scenario, if I take this risk, start a business and do all these things that everyone says is so risky. Now, I will say it gets totally different when you have kids, when you have a mortgage, when you have these obligations. That's why I'm mostly speaking to kind of that younger demographic there, but that's the situation I was in, is this completely fails. I have to drive for Uber, I have to drive for Lyft, I have to go work, a physical labor job, which I had done all through my childhood. And worst case scenario, I can't pay my rent and I live out of my car for a couple months until then I go get the consulting job with Deloitte or the PE job with Carlyle Group. The only actual long-term ramification that has on my life is I'm 1 year behind my peers in a career. And over a 50-year career, that's a 2% delay. Do I think I have the capability to outperform my peers by 2% so that I can overcome the 1 year I started after them? Yes. So what's the actual only risk that exists in that situation? It's my ego. It's my pride. It's my ego and pride of not being willing to ask somebody to sleep on their couch, not being willing to live in my car, not being willing to go back and move home for 6 months while I'm rebounding, finding a job, right? It's my ego and pride of on a Friday night, not being able to pay for beers, not being able to go out with my friends, not being able to do those things. And ultimately, like that thinking is what led me to take those chances. But that was my life. For a year, I lived off of $1 a day. I would go to the grocery store, I would buy an 89-cent bag of rice and a 99-cent can of beans because it was the cheapest way to build a complete protein. That is literally all I ate every single day for 9 months. I would go out to the bars with my friends. I didn't give up my social life, but I would never get a drink. I would never get wings. I would never get any of that. The only thing I was risking was ego and pride. And guess what? None of my friends even gave a crap. Like nobody even noticed. Everyone's so egotistical. You think, oh, people are going to judge me and think this about me. Nobody cares about you, right? Everyone's focused on themselves. Nobody cares about what you're doing with your life. And so my second answer is openness to risk, but I actually don't think it's risk. I think we manufacture this idea of risk and failure and all these things, and it all boils down to the fact that we have so much ego in ourselves we're unwilling to let go of.
That is actually fantastic. You took the question and just ran with it. In other words, be humble. So then now I want to pivot a little bit, get into more of your venture story, coming up with the idea and all of that good stuff. So I want you to take us back to the beginning, before your venture was reality, before it was even a thing. How did you initially discover the opportunity?
Yeah, so I always just joke that the only reason I got into this is because I sucked at figuring out everything else in my life, right? And so I said that story of I was through the William and Mary Washington program, I was working for a Senate committee, realized I hated politics, didn't want to be a part of it. I came back, I started working at a financial firm, realized I hated that, didn't want to do that. I worked in biz dev and with a startup, and I didn't like that, so I didn't want to do that. I moved up to New York City. I worked in social work. I absolutely loved it, but you cannot live in New York City on social work pay. Like, I'm sorry, it's just not possible. And so I basically got to this point where I was like, wow, I really suck at figuring out what I want to do with my life. One, that's on me, and I suck at that, and that's okay. But two, society is not good at helping me do this, right? Like, you want to buy a car, you research online, you get a free test drive, you figure out financing, you buy your car. You want to buy a house, you research online, you show up to an open house, you apply for a loan, figure out financing, you buy a house. You want to go to college, you research online, you show up to colleges and get a free visit, right? Then you apply, get your financial aid package, figure out financing, and then you make a decision. You want to figure out what you do with your life, you research online, right? Then you make a financial commitment by going to college and paying for a degree to go do that thing before you've even test drove that thing. Then if you're lucky, you get to test drive 1 or 2 things junior or senior year. Then you make your decision. Then you figure out the financing because now you have to use the income you made to pay back the student debt that you took out before even knowing what you were going to do with it, right? And so I said, yeah, I suck at this, but also the system is not set up well to help people be better at this. So I moved to New Orleans and worked with an educational lab and tried to just help
high school kids and college freshmen figure out what they wanted to do with their life. I wasn't starting a company at the time. I was just doing it in a more coaching way. But over time, I was recognizing patterns and trends in the content that was valuable to these kids and what was making the biggest difference. And I realized, hey, I can preemptively build things online that deliver 70 to 80% of the value of the content that they're finding most valuable. And I can preempt that, and that would become way more scalable. So I used that data to win a partnership with New York City Department of Education to build out the product, and we built the business around it from there.
That's actually fantastic. And I think there's also a lesson of that to be learned from of, you may not know what you want to do, you may not know where you're going, but go into all of the rooms and put yourself in all the experiences in order to learn what exactly that is. And then who knows, may lead you to founding a business that ends up making millions in revenue one day. So then I want to ask our next question. So you have the idea, you had an idea of where you wanted to take it, right? What were the key actions moving past that to make it a reality?
Yeah, I think it, like you just said it, you said it better than I can, just do. Like you just put yourself in the situations to do, right? Like people always ask me, like, what was the secret? How'd you become successful? It's like there was no secret. In the first year and a half of like after the New York City research pilot, I made 21,000 cold calls and I drove an average of 1,000 miles a week. Because I just went to every single school district, and I like people get so obsessed with like hacking things and being innovative. Like I can't tell you how many pre-seed stage entrepreneurs I go to talk to, and they're telling me about how they're going to do A/B marketing campaign testing, and it's like you don't even know what you're testing. You haven't even done like you haven't even spent time with your customers. All that's going to tell you is which one works better. It's not going to tell you why it works better. It's not going to give you the foundational understanding of knowing why that one works better, right? And so that like all I did was I was like, I'm just going to talk to these people as much as I possibly can. I had a rule. We did no scalable marketing. We didn't hire our first marketing employee until we were 30 people as a company. Because I said the only thing you're allowed to do is synchronous connectivity with our customers. Cold calls or get in your car, go there in person. And that's what I did. And like I had no clue how to build a product. I had no clue what the market needed. I didn't know any of that. But I mean, we had thousands and thousands and thousands of interactions with customers and spent so much time in person with them that the company kind of built itself from there.
Fantastic. And I want to say, you said 21,000 cold calls?
Yes.
You did that alone?
The first half of it was alone, and then the second half of it was with 1.5 other people.
That's so crazy. Oh my goodness. All right, and then so with that, and I think you may have already hit onto this question a little bit. I want you to tell us about that make or break moment. That feeling where maybe everything is just falling apart, or you're just trying to make it to the end. You have that goal, you see it, and you want to make it a reality. What was that turning point where you feel like everything changed?
Yeah, I don't think there was like one single point. I mean, there was like one dramatic point I could kind of think of the first time we got sued and we were running out of money and like we weren't making payroll and I was living off of debt. But like, even if I really am being honest, it's not like the company was made or broken in that exact moment. I think it's just the compounding of 1,000 little things over time. You know, I think if you really wanted to boil it down, it just went back to the commitment of what I just said, right? Like when I started the company, I was like, I'm going to see this through, right? Like, I don't care if I live in my car. I don't care if I have to make 20,000 cold calls. Actually, funny story. When I was in New Orleans trying to get my first pilot school before we had New York City, I was cold calling all these schools and nobody would talk to me because I like had no reputation or credibility. And I literally was so poor, I could not afford cab fare to go across town. And so I got in my bike in a 95-degree day in New Orleans and I showed up to this community college in person. I almost got arrested because I was biking on a highway and a cop was screaming at me. And I show up and I'm dripping sweat, so I go to the bathroom. I literally shower myself down in the bathroom, and then I walk up to the vice provost's office, and I did not lie, but I told the secretary that I was there for my meeting with the vice provost, which was true. I was there in my head, I was there for my meeting with the vice provost. And that was how we got our first pilot before New York City. And so I think like before that moment, that's when the company was made or broken. I just made the decision that like, this is going to happen. It doesn't matter. I don't care what happens to me. Like, I don't care what I have to do. Like, this is going to happen. And then I think that's the mindset that allowed us to get through the times we ran out of money, the times we got sued, the times that everything kind of felt like it was
crumbling down. Now that's dedication. Like, oh my, you almost got arrested, chased down the police, going on the highway. How did you almost get arrested? He yelled at me, should pull me over, but he was going to let me go. But he was like driving behind me with his bullhorn, yelling at me. And I was like, thanks, man. That is crazy. All right then. So now you're past that turning point. Everything is going well. You're making your money. You're helping the students find out what they want to do. I want to know, tell us, as I mentioned, you're the CEO of Major Clarity. Tell us more about what exactly the business does, day in, day out.
Yeah, so going back to where this all originated from, like I felt like it was really difficult to figure out what you want to do with your life. And so our vision was to build, and I am well aware that online experiences are never going to replace in-person experiences quality-wise, but our vision was to build a scalable, equitable, accessible version of test drives for career pathways for every single kid in America. So we would use video and activity-based content and simulation-based content online to build out test drives for these career pathways, where a kid could watch video Q&A interviews with industry professionals and then couple that with these like online sequential activities to actually get to try out and see, oh, I'm an insurance, like our insurance activity was crazy. Like a kid literally got to meet an insurance agent and then they were shown video pictures of a car accident scene and they could click around it and then have to do claims and adjustments. And you know, it was like a gamified version of test driving these things. And then we would integrate with a district's entire course catalogs and map those courses to career interests and pathways and proclivities. So then we would tell the kid what electives, core classes, curriculum classes, et cetera, to look at throughout high school based on their career interests, and then show them the post-secondary pathways, right? You want to be a welder, you need this certification. You want to be a lawyer, you're going to need to go to college, like things like that. And so on a tangible level, that's what the product actually was doing for these students. For the schools, it did all of that, but the main painkiller for the schools was we automated compliance around individual learning plans. So there was a rising trend in Virginia. There's something called the academic and career plan. Every school needs to have every kid do these at the K-12 level. Kids would do this, and we would tell schools, we have a better way of solving that compliance. Kids don't have to sit there and fill out a paper report, pen and paper. They watch these videos, do these activities, we automate it, and then we send it off to the state to for you.
That is actually revolutionary. Where were y'all when I was in high school? I can give you a couple connections. I need to go to Northern High School. I still got some friends back there.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, well, Joe, thank you so much for sharing with us today. Thank you for coming here. Thank you for being a part of the Hub community and coming to our fantastic demo day on this fantastic semester of spring 2024. And oh my goodness. Nah, I want to switch over to one more thing, the Q&A portion. That was embarrassing. My fault, y'all. My fault, y'all. So now you have heard Joe. You have heard his venture. You've heard him talk about it. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead and have the luxury to raise your hand. Anything like that? Then,
Do I need a box or?
Yes.
People online can hear you. This work?
Hello?
Oh, it works. All right. I just saw Scott Galloway speak 2 days ago. I don't know if you all know him, but he's a great follow. And people asked him this, this question I'm gonna ask you. I mean, they said, well, what's your biggest trait that you have? And he said rejection. Like, I can take rejection. And you just said 21,000. How many did you actually close? I mean, even if it's 500, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, initially, over time, we closed a lot of them. You know, at our peak, we ended up having 70% of all kids.
How did you deal with the rejection? That's, I guess, my question.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I said before, which is like the openness to risk, I think, is related to this exact thing. Like, rejection's not rejection. Like, the people take these things so personally, right? Like, flip it on the other side, right? In what world is a 22-year-old kid who's never worked in education, never been a teacher, never been a counselor, never built a product, can't code, going to call up a school district and say, give me $10,000 for me to tell you how to do education better? And they say yes, right? And so like, I never viewed it as rejection. I viewed it as I was trying to diamond mine, right? Of course you should reject me. Like, that was my baseline premise. And if I find somebody who doesn't reject me, it's a miracle. And like, I think it's the same thing. Like, people have so much ego and they take things so personally. And it's like,
bro, you're on an online dating app and you swiped right on this person who's never met you and doesn't know anything about you in an environment where people are toxic and terrible, and you're taking it personally that they are like, yeah, I don't feel the need to talk to you right now, even though we've never met, right? Like, who cares? Like, that doesn't matter at all, right? And so like, I like, it's never even felt like rejection to me. It's like, yeah, of course they should reject me. Like, that's like, I think taking it personally is just an ego-driven thing, right? And like, you have to let go of that.
That's an amazing mindset, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Should I throw it?
It'll survive. Thanks for coming, Joe. So if we would have had this conversation about Major Clarity 2 years ago, the logo up there would have been a little bit different.
Yes.
So there's another name that's now behind Major Clarity. Can you talk about that journey, what that was like?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been terrible. No, actually, it has been. So at the time of the acquisition, we were 60 employees. We are now 13 employees, 18 months later. And and look, like I'm at peace with it all. I don't want to sound begrudging. Like, the long story short, the TLDR version of what happened is we never planned on selling. I'd never raised a lot of capital. We had raised some, but it was an amount where we were so in the black that like we there was no pressure to sell, there was no pressure to raise more capital, like we didn't have to worry about those things. And so I really thought like, hey, we'll just keep building and compounding up this forever. What happened is like once we got to this point of, we were roughly probably about 5-6% of all kids in the US, 60 employees. I just realized like I can't punch with the big dogs, right? Like we're big enough to be bigger than the little guys, but I can't punch with the big dogs, and it's holding us back. And there was so much opportunity that we just couldn't take advantage of. And so some of the strategics that had wanted to acquire us previously, I started kind of going back to and having these conversations with. But because it wasn't like a financially motivated thing, we were really slow and methodical and intentional. So we picked our favorite strategic, talked to them for 3 or 4 months. Ultimately, we had a difference of opinion on what we wanted to do with this credentialing subsidiary that we had. And so we just said, okay, that's fine. And we walked away. And they tried to solve it with money and other things. And we're like, no, you don't get it. Like, that's not the vision we have. So then there was another strategic that I spent a year getting to know. Sorry, speed it up.
No,
Oh.
no, don't speed anything up. Can you define strategic?
Yes, sorry, so not a financial acquirer, not a private equity acquirer, not a fund, another company in the educational technology space. So, sorry, a larger company that's already selling to our customers, selling different products, things like that. And so I spent 8-9 months building a relationship with the CEO of this other strategic, and really got to a place where I just thought we're gonna do more together. And like, yeah, it's a gamble and I'm giving up control and autonomy, but like, I can do the things my employees want me to do. I can do the things my customers want me to do. I can really accelerate our vision. And the reason I sleep fine at night and don't have regrets is, the first 6 to 8 months were great. We were on pace to double our growth rate, scale up the impact to students by millions and millions more kids. We were talking with like LA, Clark County, like the largest school districts in America because of their connections and their resources. Unfortunately, they just got crushed last summer from a bunch of things, right? ESSER funding driving up, the macro economy, late stage venture, a bunch of things, and ultimately made the decision that, hey, you're expendable. We're gonna turn you into a skeleton crew and pump as much EBITDA out of you as possible to try to keep our core business on life support. And that's the risk of when you sell. Like that, it's you don't get to make that call anymore. And so then it's been a pretty grueling last 8 months. I won't be there much longer at this point. I've just been trying to fulfill all my obligations and responsibilities to remaining employees and customers and make sure I can transition it out as well as I can. But yeah, it's been a pretty grueling last 8 months.
Thanks for sharing that transparently. I appreciate hearing the full journey story.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been all over the place, and I've definitely learned a lot and gained a lot of wisdom, lost a lot of naivete. But you can't look like I always look back and I'm like, yeah, if I knew what I know now, I wouldn't have done that. But there's no way to know what I know now. Based on what I knew then, we were as methodical as possible. We structured it in as good of a way as possible. It was a great outcome for everybody involved. And based on the information we had, it really seemed like the best decision. So, it is what it is. And that goes into like, what is your personal definition of success? It makes you re-examine all of these questions and think about that and try to figure out what the next chapter is gonna look like.
Totally makes sense. Wait, it's coming to you.
Yeah, so this is Sai, so I have a business school. So my question to you is like, there's a lot of ambiguity between like, getting a business degree and then getting a business, creating your own business. So what's your take on this? Like, is it really helpful or like, is like the skills that actually matter in the business school? Or from the interactions in the real world or making connections?
Yeah, so I will say, like I'm constantly in a learning process as well. If you asked me this question 3 or 4 years ago, I would have been like, oh, you don't need an MBA, you like just go do it, right? Get your MBA on the ground. And like what I've realized is I went through a really cool experience. It was my fiance at the time, she's now my wife, but she like her and I started dating before I had any customers for this business, before I got my first investor check. So she like really behind the scenes, she's never had a formal role, like built this up with me. And she got way more interested in business because of that. And so she went and got her MBA. And the amount of times she would come home and be like, hey, you know that thing you screwed up? If you had applied this framework, you could have done it better. Or like, oh, you know how you like lost that negotiation? Well, you didn't know you could have done it this way. And so, yeah. And so it was like a full circle moment for me of like, everything has value, but nothing's a silver bullet, right? Everything has value, but nothing's a silver bullet. There is almost never a silver bullet in life. And so I think it's about having the expectations of getting the right things out of the right experiences and understanding like there's tremendous value in a lot of different things and a lot of different pathways. I learned so much from her going through her MBA and like reading the books with her and like doing all this stuff and talking about it a ton. But I also think her MBA experience was greatly enhanced by the fact that she had been able to have a backseat role in me building my business because on the flip side, it gave her the insight to sometimes be sitting there and being like, y'all are talking about this in a practical and theoretical sense. That's not how it works in the real world. Like this is just a textbook. This is actually like how that situation would play out. And so it's like this give and take. And so I absolutely think there's value in that. And like I've even thought about, maybe I'll go. I never was a good student. I was a terrible student. But like maybe I'll take a couple years off, go back to school and just try to like lean more into the academic side and the theoretical side and polish up on those things. But I definitely think there's a lot of value.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Omar and I have a question regarding, so you said that when you were first starting the company, you wanted to kind of help where you felt like you had a lot of trouble in your high school and kind of your college experience where you weren't sure exactly where you wanted to go. What kind of image did you see in your mind when you imagined starting the company? Like, who was your ideal consumer? What would they look like? Who were they?
Yeah, and so like one of my weaknesses, and I think I was even like a little too dismissal of this in my early journey of entrepreneurship, was like the planning thing. Like it kind of goes to what I just said I would have said 5 years ago about some of the academic stuff. Like I didn't do a lot of that. Like I know you should, and it like there's a ton of value. But like this is a totally unrelated story, but it will give you the exact philosophy I had. I remember the first year I had to pay taxes and I just did it and I didn't file them. And my mindset was this: if the company goes bankrupt, the IRS is never coming after me over the $870 I owe them in taxes, and the company's bankrupt anyway, and it was an LLC, and they don't even know I exist. And if the company makes it another year, we're gonna have more capital and resources to actually do this right. So who cares? I'm not dealing with this. And like that, like in terms of ICPs and frameworks and business plans, like I never had a business plan. Like I did some of that when I was in college because I was doing independent studies, and there was a lot of value in that. I'm not saying there wasn't, but like once I left college and got started, I probably didn't do enough of that work. Like I probably didn't, like I even remember like a lot of times people were like, oh, I started this business and I knew that I was gonna make this much money and have this much of an impact. I like told my dad, I was like, if I can just make a salary helping people figure out what they want to do with their life, that'd be insane. Like I didn't have, and so like on one hand, I was very, but at the same time, I also wanted to change the world. And so like there was a little bit of contradiction there. But I didn't have like ICP frameworks. I didn't have really long business plans. I was constantly evolving and things like that. It goes back to what I said to Jonathan earlier. I just immersed myself in it, right? Like I was like, anything I come up with is gonna be proven wrong because I don't have the adequate experience and knowledge to answer this question accurately. So I'm gonna make my 21,000 phone calls and drive 1,000 miles a week, because then they'll tell me who my ideal customer profile is and who to sell it and how to sell it. I didn't know any of that. I didn't have theories on any of that. I just said, I'm gonna spend as much time as possible with these people, and then they built the theories for me.
You have no idea how cycle that is.
Yeah, a question back there, the man, right there, to the left? Yeah,
Which one?
yeah, right there.
I was curious about financing. I know ate beans for a while, but did you ever raise money before the acquisition?
Yeah, absolutely. We did raise a little bit, and so once again, I was very much benefited by my inadequacies as a human. I sucked at raising money. I was like, I remember somebody was telling me, they're like, no, if you wanna raise money, you have to say your projections are gonna be here in 5 years. And I was like, yeah, but they're not going to be. And like, that's kind of how I pitched. And so, shocker, nobody wanted to invest. And so I just was like, okay, I'm gonna raise $500,000. And I couldn't. So and this was on the back of New York City, the largest department of education, had just awarded us an exclusive year-long RFP to build this product exclusively with them, and then would help us go to market with it. And I still couldn't raise a couple $100,000. And so I scraped together like very small checks over the course of a year throughout that to just kind of pay the bills. It ended up adding up in total to $200K, but still nobody would invest. And so I just said, fine, like almost a year. And so I was like, I'm just gonna go back to proving it. And within 6 to 8 months, we had 30% of all school districts in Virginia as paying customers. And then everybody was like, wait, can we invest now? And so then we raised $500K then. We grew to, so I think a lot of stuff gets overcomplicated. I had a simple framework of I'm never gonna raise more than the amount of money that my annual recurring revenue was at. At the time, SaaS multiples were 8 to 10x. They've come down a little bit with the cash. But the way I looked at it is if the company's worth 8 to 10x our ARR and I've never raised more than what our ARR is, like we have a ton of optionality for our stakeholders. So we built that first $500K to a business doing about 1.2 million in revenue. And then we did want to step on the gas a little bit, product development wise, and raise the 2 million seed round, and then just but we told investors this is gonna be the last round. We're not like going on the venture flywheel. And then from there just grew off our balance sheet.
What kind of investor did the 2 million?
Yeah, the 2 million. So there's a venture fund that led it in DC that thinks more like a micro private equity fund. So it is a venture. It's only about a 17 million, $20 million fund, but they totally look at things from a risk profile and a return profile like a micro cap PE or lower mid market type PE. Like they're underwriting the 3 to 5x returns in 3 to 5 years instead of the 100x 1% chances type stuff. And so they ended up leading it, and then angels and we had like some customers like Western Governors University participated in it, and some other strategics built it out.
Down the back?
Hi, Joe. It was really nice to hear you share like the story about your business. I noticed that you mentioned like there is the sort of emerging educational trend going on in Virginia. I was just wondering, like, in what portion or like how much would you say that kind of macro trend or like societal opportunities contributed to the success of your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's a million things, right? Like it's like timing too. I mean, that was what you just said though, was like my initial pitch. I still wasn't any good at raising money. So I like was going to all these people and saying, look at like one, I was doing this thing on the side of helping kids figure out what they want to do with their life, right? And like that's cool, but that's just like a vitamin. It's not gonna actually solve institutional problems for customers, and you're not gonna get through a B2B sales cycle with better content or something splashy. But at the same time, all these districts and states were moving away from the SAT being the holy grail of CCR measurement into this thing called ILP mandates, academic and career planning mandates. 37 of the 50 states had passed them, and nobody had software to help them with that because it hadn't existed. And so that was my pitch. It was like, hey, we built out this content. We can use this content to automate ILP creation. No one else is doing this, and everyone else in the space is focused on college readiness instead of the career readiness side. So I would say it absolutely played a huge role, but that was intentional, right? Like if those if we hadn't seen all of those macro factors happening, I don't know if I ever would have tried to raise money and build a business around it because I don't know if I would have been successful.
Thank you.
Can only take about like one or two more questions.
So kind of going back, so I actually ended up taking a career readiness exam in high school and they made me take one. So I just wanted to ask, like, what do you think, since yours is a little bit more different than the normal one of like, oh, you like accounting, then you should be an accountant. And it's like, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll take this to my grave, I'll fight anybody on this. Career assessments don't work, right? So the guy who invented this field says that for 18-year-olds and under. His name's Bob Hogan, I think he's passed away since. He started a company called Hogan Assessments in the 80s. He first was like opining psychology matters on workplace fit. They ended up building all these psychometric assessments for Fortune 500 companies. They'd say, I need a salesperson. They design an assessment that would say this person has a good personality to become a salesperson for you. They tried to get into K-12. They wanted to get into K-12 from an impact perspective, years and years and years. The chief science officer kept looking at it. We met with them for years about it. They didn't because you're developing too quickly, you're changing too quickly. Attention, we did a study with New York City on it. Do you want to know the number one predictor we found of whether or not a kid thought the results they got back from their career assessment were accurate or not? The number of questions. That was it. That was the number one correlated predictor. And it was just because if it was too many questions, kids stopped caring about it and stopped answering. And so like assessments absolutely matter. They absolutely have value. They absolutely show up in places, but they are not a silver bullet in the sub-18 age demographic. And so we actually took that message to market and we always said, I can't give you a silver bullet. I can't tell your kids what to be. What I can do is lower the opportunity cost of them experiencing it themselves and figuring it out themselves. So when they go to college, they might not say, I'm gonna be an accountant, but they say, well, I've tried out these 20 things and these 3 things are my most favorite, so I wanna lean into these 3 things. And like we always told school districts straight up, if you want a partner who your kids are gonna use and then it's gonna tell them what they're gonna be in 8th grade for the rest of their lives, don't work with us because it doesn't work, it's a false positive and it's doing the kid a disservice and we're not gonna do that for you. And so that was like the interactive content and the focus on the career readiness and the experientialism was really where we differentiated in the market.
Fantastic. That's all the time we have for questions, but we do have a couple minutes here. I do want to ask one more question of mine that's based off of Graham's question of, from your experience of, you sold your company, you're still the CEO, but you're still trying to fulfill your last requirements, your obligations, and it's a very grueling process for you. You said that. So how does that influence your passion for entrepreneurship? Do you see yourself making another venture down the line, or is it you're not feeling it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's unlikely I start something from scratch again, but I think it's very, very likely I continue to be involved in these types of things. So, just personally, not sure if anyone cares or not, but like what I'm leaning into now is like really the idea of building a holding company. I've been looking at a lot of acquisitions where I would be a minority partner, bring in an operator, help them grow, help them build well, like help them learn these things and be very active, involved in that. And like stuff like that really appeals to me and is really exciting to me. Like I had one of those. So he was the CEO of a company that was way more successful than mine, had over $1 billion outcome, and he was my chairman. And he went on his vacations. When things went wrong, it wasn't his problem to fix it. But when he was in town, we spent a ton of time together and he helped me build the business. I'd love to pay that forward and even formalize that a little bit more. So I still have that passion, but it has been grueling. It is a tough emotional ride. It requires a lot of sacrifices. I shared how I got it done. And like objectively, I don't know if I have that in me again. And if I don't want to do something, then I'm doing it in a way where I don't think it's the best way to do it, right? And so it's like if I'm gonna phone it in or think like I'm too good or whatever to go make 21,000 cold calls now, then I don't want to devote myself to something because I don't think I'm giving it my best effort. And I'd rather try to help other people who are willing and ready to give it their best effort and use my battle scars and resources to help accelerate their journeys.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for answering my question. Thank you for answering the audience's questions. And for real this time, I would like to thank you for coming here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciated it. And yeah, I'm always happy to be a resource. Great time at William and Mary. Graham's a rock star. I was so excited when he started doing all the things he's doing. What was it? This was 6 years ago?
9.
9? Wow. I'm old.
When you graduated.
Oh, but I'm joking. But yeah, I love everything you guys are doing. I love seeing all the changes every time I come back. So if I can ever be helpful, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks, y'all.